Welcome to a new Team CGC 9.8 video. Today's video is a short list of 6 CGC 9.8 comics that are really rare, and these comics have single-digit CGC 9.8 ratios. So you might be thinking, kind of, what is a 9.8 ratio? It's a really good measure of the rareness of a CGC 9.8 comic. And to be really accurate about these kind of things, you kind of need like a numerator and a denominator. So you take like the total number of CGC 9.8s and you divide it by the total number of graded copies for that comic book. And then times it by 100, that will give you the CGC 9.8 ratio in percentage form. So that's a really good measure of the rareness. And when we get into the list, you'll see it. The lower these ratios are, and the lower the better, the prices go higher. So it's a very, although I don't think it's certainly well known within, maybe among CGC collectors and CGC 9.8 collectors, it's a little bit more well known, but certainly there's people out there looking at this ratio and paying up for those books that are more relatively rare, and for good reason. So the one thing I really like about this ratio, when you're investing in comic books, collecting comic books, it's good to have like facts on your side. And this is just a raw measure of the relative rareness of a CGC 9.8 comic book. So the lower the better. Just to do, a really quick compare before we get into the short list of 6. Like for example, Batman 404, just an issue. A random issue, and I want to compare it to another issue. There's 549 CGC 9.8s of that, Batman 404, Year 1, Part 1. Amazing Spider-Man 300, there's 994 CGC 9.8s in the blue label. So 549 Batman, 994 Amazing Spider-Man 300, you might think like, oh, there's less Batmans, like Batman might be more expensive, there's less of them. But the CGC 9.8 ratio compared to all of the copies that have been graded, Batman 404, it's 28% of all graded copies are CGC 9.8, whereas Amazing Spider-Man 300, it's 5.9% of all graded copies are CGC 9.8. So the lower the better. This is a measure of relative rareness. So that's why Amazing Spider-Man is, kicking on $1,800, let's call it, for a CGC 9.8, and Batman 404 is like $120, $130, let's call it, in the CGC 9.8. Okay, so it's a really important measure. This video is going to concentrate on, a short list of the rarest comic books in the era that I collect, and they all have single-digit CGC 9.8 ratios, as the title says. So this is a really good starting point if you're serious about collecting comic books in this area, serious about collecting CGC 9.8 books. Good starting point with this list. So, first book, Amazing Spider-Man 238. First appearance of the Hobgoblin. Manufactured with the tattoos, because there's tattoos in this thing, and that's one of the reasons why this one's pretty, hard to find in a very, very high grade, because I think when people initially got them, they had the tattoos, and they were ripping out the tattoos or, messing up the spine a little bit because of the tattoos. So, pretty rare book. There's 419 CGC 9.8s on the census, and that's complete with the tattoos in the blue label. CGC 9.8 ratio, single digits, 8.6%. So, of all graded copies of this book, 8.6% of them are CGC 9.8s. A rare book. In Spider-Man, sometimes this gets a little bit overlooked. And, for a book that has a single-digit CGC 9.8 ratio, sometimes I see really good prices on this book. Like, if you can get this book in the CGC 9.8 white pages close to $800, that I think is a very good deal, especially if it's looking really good. In auctions from popular sellers with really good pictures, and it's looking really good. Like, I've seen this book go for $1,200, $1,350, I think I've seen one go for. That looked really good. Paid $1,100-ish for this one. Nicely centered, nice colors. Happy to pay that, to be honest. Such a nicely centered copy. And so flat, great white pages for a 1983 book. Yeah, so happy to have this one. So, one with a single-digit CGC 9.8 ratio, you got that on your side when you buy these rare books. And I think over time, more people are just going to pay attention to this thing. So, that's what I was thinking. Like, this is a really good initial list to, if you want to collect books, especially CGC 9.8 books in this era, really good list to start off with. Next book is one I don't have in the CGC 9.8. Got a nice raw copy though. Uncanny XMen 120. Really cool book. Great cover. I think it's a John Byrne, Terry Austin cover, I believe. So this is the first cameo appearance of Alpha Flight. And if you watch the channel, I recommend Uncanny XMen 121 in the CGC 9.8, a book that I got as being a pretty affordable one in the John Byrne era with a great first appearance. This book, you get the cameo of Alpha Flight, but for some reason it's much, much more rare in the CGC 9.8. 68 of them. There's 68 of these in the CGC 9.8. Yeah, this copy here is, I got it at a con. I bought it with 121 together, but they're, pretty much reader's copies. I don't know, this is probably a fine. It's nice and flat and does have white pages, I bet. This definitely has white pages. Like, there's some things about this book that's really high grade about it, but pretty dinked up spine. Yeah, probably fine grade would be my grade. But it's still nice to have a raw copy of this book. The CGC 9.8 ratio for this book, 4.2%. So of all graded CGC copies of this book, only 4.2% of them are CGC 9.8s. There's only 68 of them in the world, on the planet, and this is the lowest 9.8 ratio out of this whole list here. And I kind of mentioned that 9.8 ratio is pretty much related to the price. And this is basically the most expensive book here. It's, maybe in an old case and it, wasn't, maybe it had that, the marker through the thing in an old case or something, you might get it close to around $2,000. But a really good looking one in a new case is $2,500 or over. And lowest CGC 9.8 ratio on the whole list, highest price. And you'll kind of see that that's something that you'll see happen, where the lower that CGC 9.8 ratio is, the higher the price is. You'll see that kind of throughout this list. So next comic book here in the CGC 9.8 is a Star Wars #1. Yeah, a book that, when you think about the CGC 9.8 ratio with this book, it being 7.3%, that's pretty low. This is a 77 book, and because there were Star Wars is so popular, so there was a lot of these graded, and that really helps the CGC 9.8 ratio. That's why I think a lot of these books are popular series books: Star Wars, Amazing Spider-Man, Uncanny XMen. It's because the more books that are graded, the more likely that ratio is lower. So these 9.8s become even more rare. But 7.3%, that's really low for the price that you can get this book for, I think. And there's 598 in the CGC 9.8, so that's not too bad. You'd almost think the popularity of this book, there'd be like over 1,000 for sure in the highest grade. But so I just spoke to someone on the team. All right, they had commented on, I think it was the last video here, and they mentioned they grabbed this for like $9.25, I think it was. And that's about what I paid for mine. And, mine was in a new case, nicely centered with really vivid colors. So I think, $9.25 was pretty not full price, but a pretty fair value price, but not really a deal. I'd seen these go for around $800, and I think even some slipped under $800 there. But I think the prices have been heating up a little bit with Rise of Skywalker. And this could be one to maybe hold off on if you were really thinking of buying it like now. Although, one of the team members saying that they got it for $9.25 is what I paid for this. And so, there still could be deals to be had if you're just, on the search results, I would say, for CGC 9.8 Star Wars. But an iconic franchise and, iconic characters the first time they were in comics. And, again, low CGC 9.8 ratio, 7.3%. And this is kind of my pick as sort of the lowest with the best price, I would say. Because it's still under $1,000 basically. And, yeah, single digit CGC 9.8 ratio. You usually don't really see that. And there'll be another book on the list here where it's still a single digit CGC 9.8 ratio, but the prices are even higher. So kind of, there's some details in there that we can go over. Oh yeah, and that's the next one too. And this is a book that I do not have. So I brought a raw copy that I've had kind of stored away. It's probably the bag's all wrinkled because it's just been in my long box for a while. Uncanny X-Men number 129. So it's the first appearance of Kitty Pryde, and I think it's the White Queen, first appearance of White Queen and first appearance of Sebastian Shaw. So mostly first appearance of Kitty Pryde, though, who joins the team in 139, I think it is. So Uncanny X-Men 129, though. There's 270 of these in the CGC 9.8. This is a book I've looked to buy in the past, too. It's a really cool cover. Yeah, John Byrne, Terry Austin cover, too, I think, on this one, which is such an awesome team-up. So many awesome covers during this era, the Byrne era. CGC 9.8 ratio, 9.2%. So this one a little bit higher than Star Wars, but prices on this book sort of like 1,100 to 1,350 I've seen them go for, which was a really nice copy, admittedly. I remember seeing that one. That's one I was bidding on, and I lost it. I bid sort of high 1,200s, and it went for 1,350. Looked immaculate, to be honest, perfectly centered. No kind of marker through the barcode, which is my annoyance with this kind of era of Uncanny X-Men. So you might be able to get this closer to 1,000 in maybe an old case with maybe that marker kind of through it type of thing. But a little more expensive than Star Wars, yet a little less relatively rare with the 9.2% CGC 9.8 ratio compared to Star Wars number 1 at 7.3%. Although Star Wars number 1 being a 1977 book, this is an 80s book, I believe. Yeah, 1980. But still, certainly, if you like John Byrne X-Men and you're really looking to throw down some good money on a CGC 9.8 comic, this is one you want to consider. And we had looked at Uncanny X-Men 120 as the most relatively rare book on this whole list. So, I mean, as an investment grade book, that's pretty much, if you're an X-Men fan of the era, that's the one to go after. Uncanny X-Men 120. In second place, Uncanny X-Men 129. In third, I would say it is Uncanny X-Men 121, which is the first full Alpha Flight. And then fourth would be like Uncanny X-Men 140 for me, or 141. It is first part 1 of Days of Future Past, and first Rachel Phoenix 2. Yeah, so let's move on here to the next book. Yeah, some great. I doing the research for this video, I kind of want to bear down and maybe grab either one or both of those Uncanny X-Men books. Next one, probably, really well-known, relatively rare book, I think. This is one of the books kind of cited a lot when people are sort of explaining the low CGC 9.8 ratios. Because a lot of people are like, oh, why is Amazing Spider-Man 300 so expensive? But quickly, there's 994 of these in the CGC 9.8. This is my old case one. I got one in the new case too. I just been using my old case one lately. Get a little bit of air to the old case 300. And a really nicely centered one. This one just has perfect centering. It's in an old case, but it's basically the perfect book. The colors may be a little bit less dim than the one I have, but both of them have really great colors too. So kind of, really happy to have two high-grade Amazing Spider-Man 300s. First full appearance of Venom, Origin of Venom. CGC 9.8 ratios at 5.9%. So kicking on 6% of all graded copies of these books are CGC 9.8s. And so as I said, this one's really cited a lot as an example of a book that has a really, really low CGC 9.8 ratio for a 1988 book as well, which it is really very low. So yeah, prices for this one, maybe in an old case where it's not really centered that well or something like that, you might get it close to like 1,600, maybe 1,500 if you're really lucky. But in a new case with ones that look really good, they're really like 1,900, 2,000. For a while there, they were going over 2,000, but there's been a little bit of a lull in Spider-Man books because of, there was a lot of Spider-Man movies kind of back to back to back, and Venom number 1. Which really helped this book. So yeah, and really nice copies. Many of them had went over 2,000. So this is one that there's a lull in Spider-Man books, so it's actually a decent time to buy right now, being that Venom 2 is coming out later this year, I believe. So yeah, the kind of time to buy is now, because you're not going to want to buy when Venom 2 trailer drops and things like that. Yeah, a very rare book. This cover's been cover homaged a million times, which I think sets it up well to be a sort of classic book that will be talked about forever, kind of, and kind of a timeless book, timeless cover. This is the first kind of, the McFarlane SpiderMan cover, obviously. Origin, first appearance of Venom. And, yeah, really, like I say, to have those facts on your side, the kind of cold, hard facts of the 5.9% CGC 9.8 ratio, which is really low. And, Amazing Spider-Man 301, for some reason 300 and 301 have these really low CGC 9.8 ratios and weren't taken care of by people and collectors for some reason, relatively to other Amazing Spider-Man books. So that one's really expensive too. I would say about $1,100, $1,200 would be a decent price on that one. Personally, would just kind of stick with 300. I wouldn't want to spend $1,100 on that book when I could put that towards another one of these, because I just think this is origin and first appearance of Venom, who's like the modern villain, and then you get the first classic cover, and lots of reasons why this is so classic, and you get those facts on your side. That 5.9% CGC 9.8 ratio, very relatively rare. Okay, and yeah, we did that one. So the last book is a book I do not have, but one I wanted to talk about because I saw the prices for them, and although expensive, this is an older book, so but the prices are still kind of in there, and it's still a very relatively rare book. But it's Amazing Spider-Man 194, First Black Cat, Felicia Hardy. There's 334 CGC 9.8s, which I thought was that's a lot, I thought, for how old this book is. I think it's a 79 book. Yeah, Spider-Man books in general usually are just a little bit more expensive than everything else because they're so popular. So, 334 of these I thought was a little bit more than I initially had just thought before I looked on the census. But CGC 9.8 ratio, 6.6%. So a little bit higher than Amazing Spider-Man 300. So it just gives you an idea of how rare Amazing Spider-Man 300 is. This being, 10 years newer than First Black Cat. And it's still more relatively rare than a First Black Cat book from 1979. So, yeah, another reason why, again, Amazing Spider-Man is kind of special and why it's really expensive. But I saw a really, really good Amazing Spider-Man 194 First Black Cat CGC 9.8 white pages with no marker through the UPC code or anything. Really nicely centered one. In an auction, it went for like $1,798 or something like that. So, yeah, under $2,000 in an auction for this. And then, you see buy it nows on the internet. There's quite a lot, like 334 for this age of a book and how expensive it is. So there is a lot on the internet and sort of a buy it now prices between like $2,000 and $2,500, let's call it. But if you're patient in an auction for a really nice one, you could probably get it for under $2,000 for a really nice one. And I mean, that's pretty tempting. I think, lots of potential too for Black Cat to kind of be in some Spider-Man movies in the next like 10 or 20 years. Certainly, female characters are pretty popular, and I think they could certainly use her more. And so there hasn't really been a lot of promotion with the Black Cat, and more just, I think, that push by collectors in the last 5 years to buy anything women type or like female superheroes, which sort of inflated the prices in the last, I think, year or two. But I think, yeah, in the last 4 or 5 months, I did mention on a couple of videos, I think that's one of the areas of the comic book market that is correcting the heaviest is female superheroes. So like, just all up and down the range from modern to even, kind of first Barbara Gordon in Detective Comics. I've seen that kind of cooling off in prices too, all through the kind of CGC graded comics of that. So, the Amazing Spider-Man, though, 194, if you really like Black Cat, and, if you're serious about investment-grade books, a CGC 9.8 one of these would be quite nice. One of 334, very relatively rare at 6.6% CGC 9.8 ratio. So, yeah, you know what, I just wanted to highlight the CGC 9.8 ratio, talk about it all the time, and, I'll quickly sort of go over it every now and then, but it's good to just get a little bit more in-depth about it, because I do know collectors, and I've read Overstreet price guides where the advisors talk before the price guide. They do their little article every year. And many of them are modern collectors are talking about this CGC 9.8 ratio, you know, comparing New Mutants 98 to Amazing Spider-Man 300, and New Mutants 98 has a 20% CGC 9.8 ratio compared to a 5.9% CGC 9.8 ratio. So that's why this book is 2,000 and New Mutants is like 650, let's call it. Directly related to the CGC 9.8 ratio. It's, yeah, relative rareness is the most accurate measure of how rare a CGC 9.8 comic book. So you need a numerator and a denominator, because yeah, going back to kind of that initial comparison we did with Batman 404. So yeah, really the first thing I look at when I look at an 80s book or a 70s book is the CGC 9.8 ratio, because I'm always just buying the CGC 9.8s at this point, so always looking at that ratio the first thing. And yeah, I think for modern books it becomes less important. I think for modern books, you know, it's still important, but certainly I know Ultimate Fallout number 4, First Miles Morales, I've compared that to its like immediate comparables, and it has the lowest CGC 9.8 ratio of its like comparable book. So that's another thing the CGC 9.8 ratio is really good for too, is comparing books, like immediate comparable books. Like, you know, do you want to buy this key or that key? Like First Spider-Gwen or Miles Morales? Well, First Spider-Gwen is a higher, I think it's like 40%, and Miles Morales is like 29% CGC 9.8 ratio. So Miles Morales is more relatively rare. Plus, there's less copies of Miles Morales in the CGC 9.8. First Miles Morales, Ultimate Fallout 4, in the CGC 9.8. Less of them than First Spider-Gwen, which is Edge of Spider-Verse number 2 in the CGC 9.8. So yeah, it's really helpful to like compare books to each other. And I know the Overstreet advisors are talking about it, so it's certainly, you know, people that are serious about buying, especially CGC 9.8 books, it's very important. So I think it did kind of deserve its own video with a list of really rare comics that I think are kind of one of the first lists that, if you like this era, that you could look at investing in CGC 9.8 comics. Yeah, check out these 6 books. If you really, really like them, you should probably buy them. Like if you really like the characters, so, or if you're really nostalgic for the characters, or like that's why I bought Star Wars. I love Star Wars growing up, and yeah, just to get like the highest graded book with it being so relatively rare and under $1,000. I would say Star Wars is kind of the value pick of this whole list. And then, you know, certainly Amazing Spider-Man 300, and then the lowest CGC 9.8 ratio of all is, Uncanny XMen 120 in the CGC 9.8 white pages, which I think would be an amazing investment grade CGC 9.8 book. Alright, I think that's it for today. Thanks so much for watching, if you made it this far. I'd invite you to join the team and subscribe to Team CGC 9.8. Hit the bell, get all their latest notifications. Add me on Instagram and Twitter too. I'll have all the links are in the description below for all that. So thanks for watching though. And yep, I know I always talk about this CGC 9.8 ratio, so it definitely deserved its own kind of video and own list of some really rare comics. So thank you very much for watching today. I'll see you on the next one.